Learning to read tab is one of the most useful skills a beginner banjo player can learn. So much banjo material out there is in tab form, and so learning this really will help you throughout your banjo lifetime. We're going to look at Clawhammer Banjo tab today. I'm going to teach you how to read it. We're going to walk through a tab, and I'll show you everything you got to know. And the first thing I want to mention is if you are a newer banjo player, check the link in the description. There's a link to a free video course I have called the Quick Start Guide to the Banjo. It'll teach you everything you need to know to play your first song. We're playing Bury Me Beneath the Willow today. There's a link in the description if you want to download the tab for yourself. But let me play through it real quick, and then we will walk through the tab. So let's walk through the tab. I'll explain how it all works. First thing I want to mention though is that there's like a million different banjo players out there that create their own tabs. Sometimes they might be slightly different. The way I notate something might be a little different than someone else does. That's okay. Like if you learn the basics will be the same across all of them, but sometimes those little nuances can just appear a little differently. So sometimes you might have to do a little interpretation. Okay, so I'm going to take out my pen here and let's just start walking through the tab. So the first thing you might notice, this is optional. This may or may not be there, but we've got these chord charts. So the cool thing about this is this shows you the chords that are used in the song with how to play them. So you read them from left to right. So if we look at this C chord, for example, the leftmost string is the 5th string. We've got the little X over that, which means we don't play it. Next would be the 4th string. And that you see that little circle on the 2nd fret. So you're just going to play the 2nd fret. 3rd string has the O above it. That means open, so nothing fretted there. 2nd string is the 1st fret. And then in the 1st string is the 2nd fret. And we strum that all together. We've got a C chord. If you look at the G chord, you'll see that it's all open except for that 5th string, which we don't play. Technically, the 5th string is part of that too. I just usually put an X over that because we don't really play the 5th string as part of the chord usually. And we've got our D chord as well. And then if we look here, this tells us how to tune our banjo. So standard open G tuning is probably the most common banjo tuning, maybe that or double C, but we do always want to check the tuning to make sure that we are in tune for the tab. So we see here, we've got our 5th string is a G, 4th string is a D, 3rd string is a G, 2nd string is a B, 1st string's a D. If you start playing it and it just sounds totally off and it's all wonky, you don't know what's going on, chances are you might have forgotten to check the tuning. Next we have the time signature. That is this here. You see how it says 4/4? It's 2 4s stacked on top of each other. So let me explain how that works. So one sort of box between these two vertical lines here is called a measure. A measure really is just a container for music, and this time signature tells us there are 4 beats per measure. So we naturally subdivide that measure into 4 beats. We would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just like that. And that is definitely the most common time signature you will find in old time music, but you may occasionally come across 3/4 time, and all that means is there's 3 beats per measure. So we divide each measure into 3 beats, and it'd be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, just like that. Got it? So let's look at how those beats work in a measure. Typically in clawhammer banjo, you're going to be dealing with quarter notes and eighth notes. A quarter note just has a straight stem like this, and an eighth note will have a flag at the bottom, which may be connected to the next one. So like here, these are eighth notes. When you divide a note into 4 equal parts, that's quarter notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can divide those further into eighth notes and go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? So the way we count the rhythm of this first measure, then we've got a quarter note followed by 6 eighth notes. So it'd be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's how you read the rhythm. You may occasionally, kind of rarely, come across 16th notes in a tab. If you do, that is going to be indicated by a double line connecting them, like that, right? If you see a 16th note, that basically means you're taking that quarter note and dividing it into 4 equal parts, where the eighth note, you're dividing the quarter note into 2 equal parts. Now, if you've ever seen sheet music before, each line represents a note. So you have Every Good Boy Does Fine, where the bottom is an E all the way up to F. We actually do tab differently. Each line here represents a string on your banjo, which makes this much faster and easier to read. So the bottom string here is string 5, and we've got 4, 3, 2, and 1, right? That is not easy to read, but you get the idea, right? So if we start at the top and go down, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then the number of the note indicates the fret you play. So on this first one, we've got a 0, which that just means the open string. So we've got 1, and that's a quarter note. And then we've got 2 and. So you see we're playing 3 notes there. You see the first, second, and third all have open strings noted there. That's just going to be a brush stroke. And then we've got the 5th string on the end. That's going to be your thumb pluck. So if you've got your bum diddy, that's basically what that is. It's just 1, 2, and. And then after that, we have our open second string again, followed by our open third. And that's going to be a drop thumb, and I'll explain in just a minute how you know that. Then we have our first fret of the second string, followed by our thumb pluck on the 5th. Okay, so you might be wondering, how do we know what's a thumb pluck, what's a brush stroke, what's a single note strike, how does, what's a drop thumb, how does all this work? There's actually some really easy rules of thumb that make this simple. So any single note on the downbeat, when I say downbeat, I mean on the 1, 2, 3, or 4, is going to be an index finger strike. Or you could use your middle finger, but it's your main striking finger. I use my index finger, so that's how I'll refer to it. So that first beat, we know we're going to play with just our index finger, right? So I'm just going to write a little I here so we know. Next, on that 2, we've got 3 notes. So that's going to be our brush stroke. So I'll write a little B here. And then on the end, we're playing that 5th string, and that's going to be your thumb. Now, here's how you know that. So we said that, downbeats 1, 2, 3, 4, either going to be index finger strikes or brush strokes, right? Well, anything that appears on the end, it's either going to be a thumb pluck or you're going to do something with your left hand, like a hammer-on or a pull-off to make that sound, right? We never strike with our index finger or do a brush stroke on the end of a beat. It's just not the way Clawhammer works. So what that means now is on that third beat here, we've got our index finger because that's beat 3. And I'm just going to write this in. So we got 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and, right? So we know on the end of 3, it's not going to be an index finger strike. So we have to do something else, either a drop thumb or we have to do something here. So normally hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, that kind of thing, that's going to be going from one note to another on the same string. What we have here is a note on the next string. It's another open string. So because of that, the easiest way to do that is with our drop thumb. So when we come in and hit that second string open, we're just going to put our thumb on the third string, pluck up there, right? And now 4, we've got our first fret of the second string, followed by our regular thumb pluck on that end, right? The basic rule of thumb here, though, is that except in very special cases you don't really need to worry about, your index finger is never going to play on the end of a beat. It's always going to be on the downbeat. And for the most part, your thumb is only going to play on the end of a beat, never on the downbeat, almost never on the downbeat. Few enough exceptions that you really don't have to worry about it for now. Cool? Okay. So if we continue on, we can do this on that second measure as well. So we've got, it's the same exact rhythm. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. So what do we see? Okay, we've got a index finger strike on the open second. Makes sense. Then we've got our brush stroke on the end. Well, we know that's got to be a thumb pluck. And then 3 will be an index finger strike. Now here, we're on the end, so it's got to be a thumb pluck, right? Or something with our left hand. And since we're going from one string to another, it's going to be a thumb pluck, drop thumb. And then here, again, downbeat 4, index, and then thumb again. Not too bad, right? Like once you get these rules of thumb, this really becomes very easy. So let's look at measure 3. Now notice too, we've got these chords marked above the measures, and we had the G in 1. That means that until something's different here, that G is the default chord we're playing. And then in measure 3, we move to the C chord. This is great if you're playing with a guitar player or trying to do some sort of backup. Now you know the basis of the chords of that section of the song. So here we've got 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. Okay, this one is a little different though. Okay, so again, we've got our index finger on 1. We've got our brush stroke on 2. And this time we have that fretted chord there, but it's still the same brush stroke. And we've got a thumb pluck on the end of 2. Now here, beat 3. Okay, notice we're going from an open note to a fretted note. Here, that doesn't make sense to do a drop thumb, right? Because we can't set our thumb on the same string that we're hitting with our index finger. So we have marked here, you can see this little line indicates, and the little H above it indicates a hammer-on. You won't always see this. Some people don't put this in. Some people just would have these notes without the little indicator. I like to add it in just to make it crystal clear. When you see that H with the line, that means hammer-on. So it's 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. So again, we've got our index finger, and now this is going to be our left hand, so our right hand doesn't do anything there. And then we're back to index finger, thumb pluck. Right, so if I play those, I'm going to play those first 3 measures really slowly and just follow along with the tab. All right, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. So really, most of this tab kind of follows that same pattern, but I just want to point out a few other things that you will commonly see. You've learned quite a bit already. So let's look down here in measure 6. Here, we're going from a fretted note on 3 to an open note, and we've got that tied line again with the P above it, and that stands for pull off. So you're just going to count that 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. Now there's one other embellishment that doesn't appear in this tab, but I want to show it to you because you will encounter it occasionally, and that's a slide. You'll see a slide, it'll be written like this. So say, for example, 2, we'll just pretend this is the 4th string, goes to 5. Those are tied with an 8th notes, but then we have a sort of diagonal line between the two. And all that means is when you see that, that's a slide. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and, right? Just like that. Just know if you see that diagonal line, that's what that means. That's a slide. So last thing I want to mention in this tab that is worth knowing is this crazy section here. So we've got, first, we've got the repeat sign. Repeat sign, you'll just see this double black bar with the 2 dots to it. What that means is when you hit that, you're going to go back to the opposite symbol there, right? So we see that in measure 1, we've got that double black, those double black lines with the dots on the right. So when you see it with the dots on the left, you just go all the way back there. And it doesn't always necessarily appear on the first measure. It could appear anywhere in the tab. Just know that that means go back to the most recent, the closest opposite of that repeat symbol. And then here we've got this little, see this little bracket with the 1 underneath it, and then this here bracket with the 2 underneath it. So what that means is the first time you play through, so you're going to go through, play lines 1 through 4, hit this repeat sign, and you're going to play that for, you're going to play what's under the 1 here, and you're going to go back and start again. Now, when you get to here, when you get to measure 15, after you play measure 15, you're going to skip over this and go to the second ending. And that's how we end the song. So I want to show you how that sounds and how that works. So if we start at that 4th line, it just sounds like this. Then we start all the way back at the beginning of the song. We play through again, and now the last line does this. See, that's just how we end the song. And again, you may see that anywhere in the tab. All right, so there is your tab reading lesson. That'll do it for this week. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to let me know in the comments below. I'm happy to help. I'll see you next week.